Hey everyone, we are in Chapter 9, Articulations, Joints, starting on slide 10. We've already discussed the different types of joints based on movement, synarthrotic, amphiarthrotic, and diarthrotic. We're focusing on those diarthrotic joints here, specifically about what they're made of. All diarthrotic joints are synovial joints. They have synovial membrane, synovial fluid, and other things that allow for movement and lubrication and stability. So starting on slide 10, the first structure that we'll be talking about that we find at synovial joints are joint capsules. A joint capsule is a space, and it's an encapsulated space. That's where capsule comes from. A capsule means a surrounding container. It's a space where two or more bones meet, usually two, encasing that area where they meet. So where I've drawn my pink marker, that is where the joint capsule is. It's forming a border on all around the bone in 3 dimensions. This picture here is that generic looking picture of a joint I'm talking about. It's not no specific joint. Here on the right side, the joint capsule of the knee of the tibio patella femoral joint would be coming around like this. Ooh, something like that. Be coming around like that. The joint capsule has 2 layers. The outer superficial layer, it's thicker. It's made of dense regular connective tissue. It's an extension of ligaments. The inner layer is the synovial membrane. And if you recall what synovial membrane is made of, it's made of simple squamous epithelium, and it was discontinuous so that fluid could leak out. Check back to chapter 4 if you need a refresher on that. Simple squamous epithelium as well as areolar connective tissue. That's what's lining the joint cavity. The joint cavity is literally a cavity. It's a space, and that space is filled with fluid, synovial fluid. That synovial fluid, let me use a different color, is what's filling in this joint cavity, the space between the bones. So where I'm coloring in green is where synovial fluid can be found. This fluid, it's slippery, it allows for lubrication, it allows for shock absorption. That's what, if you're familiar with hydraulics is water, and water is a great shock absorber. Similarly, this synovial fluid can not only lubricate, but also act as a good shock absorber. You'll notice that we have articular cartilage, where I'm about to color in blue. We have articular cartilage here. And if you look back to chapter 7, I believe, chapter 6, when we talked about cartilage, it's found, some cartilage can be found on the ends of bones. That's called articular cartilage, and it's made of hyaline. And in general, cartilage is not well vascularized. It does get some nutrients, oxygen, glucose. It does get some nutrients very slowly as it diffuses through this fluid and through the extracellular matrix from synovial fluid. You get nutrient distribution for chondrocytes. Again, it's not much. These chondrocytes are adapted to live with very low amounts of oxygen, very low amounts of nutrients. But it also means they don't heal very well. So that's a joint capsule, surrounding space holding all of this fluid together. Other things you can find in joint capsules or synovial joints, or besides joint capsules, if you have a movable joint, you need muscles to move that joint, and muscles need to connect to bone with tendons. So let's take a look at this picture here on the right side. You can see here's one muscle, We haven't gone over the name of it yet. Don't worry about that yet. And you can see that this muscle connects to a bone. So here's bone. It's the patella. And here's the tendon. And here's the muscle. Tendons made of dense, regular connective tissue. They're both tendons and ligaments made of dense, regular. Connect muscle to bone, provide a lot of strength in that direction that it's pulling. Ligaments connect bone to bone. Here we can see again the patella, and then here you can see the tibial tuberosity of the tibia. And you can see a ligament connecting from the patella to the tibia. That's one example of a ligament. This ligament is outside of the capsule. This ligament is outside of the capsule. Compare that with other ligaments that you might find within the joint capsule. You can see this ligament here. It's going to be connecting the femur and the tibia. There's going to be another one too, but you have a ligament inside the capsule. I point this out because when you have ligaments inside the capsule, that means it's surrounded by that synovial fluid, which also means there are no blood vessels surrounding that ligament, versus ligaments that are outside the joint capsule. They are surrounded by blood vessels. They are not surrounded by synovial fluid. Which one do you think is going to heal faster if you tear one? Not fun to tear a ligament in general. You're going to have some time where you need to heal, or maybe in some cases you can't repair, and so you'll just kind of get rid of it, or you'll get an implant. But if you tear a ligament and it's inside the joint capsule, that will have a very low chance of healing on its own. If you tear a ligament outside of the joint capsule, with some help, it has a better chance of healing because it's surrounded by blood vessels. Inside the joint capsule, there are no blood vessels. It is avascular. So tendons, ligaments, those are some features of synovial joints. You need tendons because you have to move the joint. You need ligaments to hold bones together. And they're both made of dense, regular connective tissue. You find adipose at synovial joints. Adipose is found in lots of places, and here it's providing cushion. You need cushion for these joints that are constantly moving, bearing weight. These are simply fat pads surrounding the joint cavity. They're not within the joint cavity, they're surrounding the joint cavity. I'm not going to make you point out specific locations of fat pads, like the name of this fat pad or the name of that fat pad. I just want you to know the presence of fat pads surrounding the joint capsule to provide cushion. Joint capsules were lined with synovial membrane and were filled with synovial fluid. Those aren't the only places to find synovial membrane and synovial fluid. Here, let's say you have, let's take a look over here on the right side. Let's say you have your patella, and since the patella does a lot of rubbing and acts like a fulcrum, like a pulley, you need some further protection and lubrication in this area. Here, you can find what's called a bursa. A bursa is a synovial membrane filled with synovial fluid to provide lubrication. Here, between the tibia and this ligament, you find another bursa. At the elbow, you can find one at the olecranon process. At your acromial deltoid region, you can find several bursae. Bursae is plural. More places where you can find synovial membrane filled with synovial fluid to provide cushion, reduce friction. I'm not going to, also once again, I'm not going to test you on specific names of bursae. There are names of every single bursa in your body. Again, I'm not going to test you on that, but I want you to know their existence. Bursae are outside of the joint cavity. outside of the joint capsule, made of synovial membrane with synovial fluid to provide lubrication surrounding joints. So there are joint capsules, there are bursae, and there's one more structure that has synovial fluid, and that is a tendon sheath. The difference between tendon sheath and bursa, both of them, well, one similarity, both of them are filled with synovial fluid. The difference is tendon sheaths are wrapping around the tendon. They're providing lubrication for the tendon as it's moving, because tendons are always moving when your muscles are moving. Cushions your tendons when rubbing against bone, when rubbing against muscle, or even other tendons. You can see how in this drawing you have this tendon sheath. It's just kind of wrapping around this tendon. And highlighted here in blue are examples of tendon sheaths. In places where there's high stress, or where the bones that are articulating, the bone features, the bone markings that are articulating have a funny shape where they might rub up against each other, we want to put a cushion between those things to prevent the rubbing or or to limit the amount of stress that's being put on that joint. We can put fibrocartilage there. We've talked about fibrocartilage at intervertebral discs. We have talked about them at menisci. The ones at the knee, the menisci, and other joints, like you can see at the temporomandibular joint, there's this fibrocartilage pad. These are called articular discs. Articular, it's at a joint. Disc, it's a disc shape pad of fibrocartilage. They are separating that joint cavity so that separate movements can occur in each space between those potentially weirdly shaped bone markings. The two specific joints that I'd like you to know are the temporomandibular joint and the tibio patella femoral joint, where you can find an articular disc at your jaw joint, your temporomandibular joint, and the menisci. One here in the superior view of the knee. At your tibio patella femoral joint. There are other ones at different joints. We're not going to go over the names of each one, but at these two joints, I want you to know specifically. Made of fibrocartilage to withstand all that stress from the bones pushing on each other. Here, I just wanted to show what can happen over time if bones do rub up on each other a lot. Pictured here is a femur, and you can see the head of the femur, and it's worn out. The articular cartilage is worn out. This will cause a lot of friction, a lot of damage. The synovial membrane will be damaged too, which is not shown here. But let me play the video. What can be done is you can replace the joint thanks to modern advancements in medicine. What they'll do is they will remove the femur out of the acetabulum. Oh, sorry, they'll make incisions first. To get to the femur, here we go. Move the ligaments out of the way. Remove the femur from the acetabulum. You can see that the acetabulum is also damaged. So both the acetabulum and the head of the femur have to be replaced. There we go. So here we go, shaving down the acetabulum to remove the damaged parts, and we're going to insert a prosthetic socket. And then the head of the femur is removed. The body, part of the diaphysis, has to be hollowed out. So some of the yellow marrow is removed to make room for this prosthetic so that it has some leverage and the two can fit in. They make it look real easy. I'm sure it's a bit more involved here, but you can see this prosthetic inserted into this person's body in an X-ray. I think what will also be useful is if I show you cadaver pictures of, cadaver video of some of these synovial parts. So if you go to our videos page on articulations and movements, scroll down to Ackland's. You can also search for it within Ackland's, but I'm going to look at this tendon sheath example and Bursa example. Let's look at the Bursa example first.
This lubricated puck.
Here we have, oops. Had it queued up. Okay, here we go. Right now they're showing the patellar ligament, what they're poking at. That's the ligament. But the bursa is going to be hiding underneath the patella, deep to the patella. So where they're pulling right now, under here, is where you can find the bursa. That's one example of a bursa. Let's back up a little bit. In this space, lined with synovial membrane and synovial fluid, you have a bursa between the patella and the femur to reduce friction. What they're pulling at here with their tweezers, they're pulling at the joint capsule. They're pulling on the fibrous part of the joint capsule. Here's another view. Where they're touching, that's the joint capsule. What was outside of it is the ligament. More joint capsule here on the posterior side. So this is the fibrous outside. And you can see that it kind of limits how much the joint can move as well. Here they've cut the joint capsule open, and you can see where the fluid would be. So that space is the joint cavity. So once again, this is a cut joint capsule. This is where the fluid would go. Last thing I want to show is that tendon sheath example. Here we're looking at the hand, and you can see connective tissue making these tunnels down the fingers. You can see tendon here that's deep to this. And tendon would fit in this spot. What's surrounding it is the sheath, and the sheath has synovial membrane and synovial fluid, normally would. They're going to, so you can see their pointer going underneath there into the sheath. And they're about to make some cuts to show and expose the length of the sheath. There is the length of the sheath where the tendon would fit. Provide lubrication as well as leverage as you're moving your joints. All right, that's where we're pausing for this video. In the next video, we'll go over one specific synovial joint in more depth. We'll be going over the knee, the tibiopatellofemoral joint. So I will see you in the next video. Let me know if you have any questions, leave questions in the comments and the discussion.